I'm Captain Kirk.
Fascinating.
I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
Most illogical.
Aye, sir.
Well, that was different. Yep, lousy, but different.
Places, please, and here we go.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, bears, Vorgons, and things to episode 112 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Jarman.
I'm Steve. We're here to compare, contrast, and confer about our two favorite franchises. And Jarman, remind the fine folks of podcast land what those are.
Well, folks, those are the Muppets and Star Trek, and we do one-to-one reviews of the Muppet Show and Star Trek The Next Generation.
And this week, we have the Muppet Show with special guest Mac Davis and the Next Generation episode, Hide the Q.
Hide and Q.
Hide and Q.
Hide the Q.
On my side now. That changes things.
Just a little bit. So, Steve, before we get into that, tell us about the guest star of the Muppets this week, Mac Davis. Who is this person?
Mac Davis is a country music singer and a minor actor. Her successes were actually as a songwriter for Elvis. Mac Davis wrote In the Ghetto and A Little Less Conversation.
I didn't know that. Wow.
You and I performed in show choir.
Yes, it was terrible.
It was awful. He found some successes. First in 1972 with his hit Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me, which we hear here. But his actually biggest, most commercial success was actually from the novelty song that he also performs here, It's Hard to Be Humble.
Ah, yes.
He does have some minor acting credits to his name in shows like Murder, She Wrote and Webster. So if our audience knows him from anything, it's likely one of these small acting roles or his music. But there's no current major thing that you would know Mac Davis from.
And apparently he died in the year 2020, I think it was. It wasn't that long ago. It was something like that.
Yeah, it was not that long ago. He was performing and doing stuff for a long time. Had a lot of shows and like one episode appearance and guest appearance kind of things.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, IMDb. But yeah, so what's he up to this week on the Muppet Show? Well, backstage, Muppet Labs is testing out a dangerous copy machine. Beaker's then pulled in right before it's rolled out for a sketch. Link Hogthrob takes a moment to chat with Mac, and inspired by Link's clout, Mac performs It's Hard to Be Humble. So we get a great backstage number. The gang of Muppets joins in. Then up in his dressing room, Mac Davis performs The Poor Boy Boogie, where he does until the gang of Beakers interrupt, and then he does like country beatboxing scat stuff. I don't really know how to explain
It's a lot.
And then finally, also backstage, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew is hiding from the Beakers. He's in disguise. And then Kermit gives him away and he escapes.
They're seeking revenge, the Beakers.
On stage, we get Link Hogthrob, New Zealand, Fozzie, Pops, Rizzo, Gonzo, and Scooter, who sing another opening, another show. The curtain after curtain closes on them as Beauregard is in the back working the ropes. And they fight to stay ahead of closing curtains as they perform this number. And it's entertaining as hell. Kermit welcomes Mac Davis, who is under the sea. He's sort of dressed like Aquaman, like kinda. And he's on a big fish hook, and he sings a sultry song to a mermaid and Miss Piggy, Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me. Up next, we get Dr. Bunsen Honeydew. He demonstrates the copy machine that we saw in backstage, but then copy after copy after copy of Beaker pop out of the machine, and Dr. Bunsen Honeydew just runs for help. On stage, Rolf plays a seemingly normal number, like a regular piano number. Jesus, Joy of Man's Desire, I think is what it's called. He is interrupted by Beauregard, who's been told to clean the stage. And so he cleans as he performs and messes it up. Following this, we enter the Swedish chef's kitchen where Dr. Bunsen Honeydew is hiding from the gang of Beakers in the pot. The Beakers are on the hunt and they take him down. And Dr. Bunsen Honeydew barely escapes. We find ourselves with the bear on patrol who has arrested one of the Beakers. He flagrantly violates his right by making a mockery of Miranda rights, which was a little
doesn't age
then
well.
More Beakers show up. They lock them up, and then they think they've broken out because they find more Beakers. But it turns out there's just more and more Beakers until there are 8 Beakers. And outnumbered, the police are forced to run. Kermit introduces Mac Davis one last time. He hits the stage with the Muppet Band. Mac first gives thanks to the band and sings I Believe in Music. Statler and Waldorf are in on it. He's joined by more and more beakers, and the camera pulls out to show the entire band has also been replaced by beakers. It's like a scene from the end of The Birds. Kermit thanks Mac Davis one last time. Beakers steal his bow. Dr. Bunsen Honeydew is disguised as a beaker, but Mac gives him away. The beakers make chase, and that is what we call the Muppet Show. And I want to give a special note here that the end theme that would typically be the Muppet Band with the credits over it has been changed out entirely for beakers.
Yeah, and Statler and Waldorf.
Even the outro, Statler and Waldorf get changed out. It is so good. So, Jarman, what did you think of this week's episode of the Muppet Show with Mac Davis?
So I really enjoyed this episode, and I love the through line with the beakers copying through everything and every sketch. And I really thought this is a great example of a host who just was themselves throughout the whole episode, but still really melded well somehow with the whole episode. And I think it's because he's so likable and he's very charismatic in his very laid back, cool guy kind of way that. And the country western is a good fit for Muppets as well, because it's very storytelling. And so I feel like
the fact that one of his songs was like very much a novelty song, which the Muppets do well with.
Yeah. And it fit in well with just like talking to them and telling them those stories and the flirty song with Miss Piggy. And so it didn't bother me nearly as much that he never wore like a crazy costume.
And when he came out and thanked the band and all that, that was very likable. And like,
yeah,
I can't think of another moment we've really had with a host like that.
Because you'd have hosts who be themselves, but they don't feel like they're kind of trying to be on the same level or likable with the Muppets. They're like kind of like just doing their thing.
It's just he was a very likable host, and you're absolutely right. It was a very likable episode.
Yeah.
I'm going to venture to say this will be in the top 3 for this season. There are some great ones coming up. Don't get me wrong. There are some great ones coming up, but this one kind of took me by surprise.
Me too. I think this happened to us a lot with these hosts that we don't really know very well. That kind of just suddenly surprise us because I guess we have no expectations. So we just go in like, well, what's this going to be? And it just really came out really likable. It was a great, solid episode. The
fact that like I love a good backstage plot. And I love backstage musical numbers. So the fact this had both of them was like, yes, excellent.
And I liked it that it didn't get rid of all of our sketches. It just incorporated the backstage plot into those sketches like Swedish Chef and Baron Patrol. And
and the beakers just inundating. It was so good.
Yeah.
So I'm also going to say, and I'll just say it now, my Muppeteering moment is another opening, another show, which was just an outstanding number. Great performances from everyone in it. Them fighting to stay ahead of the curtains, not only to mention the technical aspect of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And the fact that I believe that there were like 7 puppeteers doing this.
Yeah, with the curtains going crazy.
And making it feel like real heavy movement. And there's a great behind the scenes thing that they did of the making of an episode of the Muppet Show. And I think it was maybe this one and one other.
So
there's the behind the scenes of another opening, another show. And it's crazy to watch.
Oh, I'd love to watch that. Yeah.
I highly recommend it. It's probably on YouTube. But so that's like that might be, in my opinion, my favorite musical number in the Muppet Show.
Wow. That's saying a lot. Or in the season. Okay.
I'm just saying that's up there from like, now that I've seen it and experienced it again and really taken it and have a full breath of what the Muppets are, the Muppet Show is like, that's up there with like Harry Belafonte's performance now.
Oh yeah. That's a big one too. With the ship and everything.
That's up there with Elton John doing Crocodile Rock.
That was also very elaborate.
Right. Not only elaborate, but just like great singing, great rapport, fun to watch, like all those things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And there was a few numbers like that in this episode alone. So it just kind of all worked out.
Yeah.
So yeah, top of the season for me so far too, I think.
Top of the season without doubt. And I was actually looking over what we were making because we are into like the last part of the season now.
Of the whole show.
And so I was looking who we have left. And while there are a few mehs in there, we do have like 5 classics ahead of us.
Oh, nice.
Including Carol Burnett.
So some stiff competition coming up.
Yeah, some stiff competition coming up. Like Linda Ronstadt's in there. Hers is exceptionally good. Yeah. So we've got some really good ones coming up.
I like it.
But I think we're gonna have a very strong top 3 this season.
Finally. No, I'm just kidding. They've been good ones.
I like this more than like anything from like season 2. You know? Sorry, season 2. I love you though.
So what are songs trivia info for this thing?
Another opening, another show from the musical Kiss Me Kate by Cole Porter. Despite its popularity and becoming sort of a showbiz anthem, it wasn't included in the 1953 big screen adaptation of Kiss Me Kate, despite the fact it's like one of the biggest songs from the show. Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me. This was the number 8 song of 1972 by Mac Davis. And just to give you some context, ahead of it that year were Lean on Me, and Sammy Davis Jr.'s Candyman.
The Candyman can.
And John McLean's American Pie.
Wow.
Just to give you some context of songs that were ahead of this.
That's a big year.
It's Hard to Be Humble. This was another Mac Davis original, and it has been covered by a ton of people. But one that was sort of notable and strange, a guy named Peter Blanker, he translated it to Dutch, and it was like a Danish top 10 hit. It's Hard to Be Humble.
It also was my dad was always sang that song all the time. So as soon as he started singing that song, I'm like, oh my gosh, I had these like memories of my dad singing that song since I was a little kid.
All right, so Jesus, Joy of Man's Desire. So this is by Bach. All right, so buckle in for this one. This one was a wild ride. So in his old age, Bach went blind. And this was crazy to read. So in 1970, he underwent 2 eye surgeries. Not 1970, in 1750. God,
right, not 1970.
1750. 2 eye surgeries. Think about that.
Yeesh, in 1750.
Okay, so the surgeon was a guy named John Taylor. It turns out since then, in historical records and reviews, it's been figured out he's one of history's biggest quack doctor. They think he blinded hundreds of patients.
Oh, no.
And the infection he left Bach with is what killed him.
Oh, my God.
Get this, he killed Handel, too.
What?
Handel's Messiah Handel, he killed him, too.
Jesus.
Yeah, man, this is a wild ride.
Why have I never known that?
I don't know. But he didn't like kill them on the table, but both of them suffered from major infection after the surgery that led to their death.
We live in good times right now compared to what they lived in.
All right, The Poor Boy Boogie. This is from Mac Davis's album Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me. So it was all sort of part of this package.
Mm-hmm.
And then I Believe in Music. I always thought this was a show tune.
I never thought that.
I always thought this was a show tune. But this was later down the road performed on the televised special. So I figured out why. So I thought this was a show tune because I've seen Tony Clifton, Andy Kaufman's alter persona, sing it.
Oh, yeah. That's where I know it from.
Show tune stuff. So I assumed it was a show tune.
I believe in music.
I believe in love. Yeah. Well, I thought it was a show tune. But later on, and there's a televised special from like the early 80s called The Fantastic Miss Piggy Show, with all star-studded guests and performances, including Tony Clifton, played by Andy Kaufman, and he performs I Believe in Music on The Fantastic Miss Piggy Show.
Oh my gosh. So
it was so good. But it's a Mac Davis song. I didn't know that.
Interesting.
So best momentary moment, I already let mine spell. Another opening, another show, I think really stole it.
Well, that shows you how good this episode is. I have kind of 2 from this. Okay. So that was really impressive, of course, that whole number. But something that really was just a smaller moment that just really impressed me with how well synchronized it was the scene with Dr. Bunsen Honeydew wearing his disguise and then the coordinated beakers hiding from him as he turns from side to side. And there was so many of them. I was just like, that's really impressive. They did that so well. And then the other is when Rolf was playing Bach was a close second for me because they did close-ups on his hands and it was like he was really playing. You could see the right notes being hit with his fingers. And I was just like,
what you feel are the right notes. Yeah.
Yeah. They look like they should be the right notes. Like that was attention to detail that that person had to learn at least somewhat what that song was going to sound like and make it look like they're really playing it. It looked like it was really being played by Rolf. And I was like,
so many best parts of this episode.
Yeah. So that was my kind of 2 as a cheat.
All right. Well, now let's see if we find Hide and Q.
Hide the Q.
Same level of thrilling. Hide the Q.
All right, so Hyde and Q, the Enterprise are on their way to help the victims of a nearby Federation colony that just suffered from a methane explosion, which apparently still happens in the future. And on their way, they are once again stopped by Q. And he says they are to take part in a game. So he transports all the bridge crew except for Picard down to this random planet, which Jolie affectionately called the soundstage planet. Because it looks like a soundstage. He says they are placed in a scenario where all they have to do is survive, but he says the game will not be fair. And they soon realize they're about to face off against a battalion of these pig men that are in French Napoleon-era uniforms for some reason. But Tasha Yar refuses to cooperate, so she's sent back to the ship, and she's sent to as a penalty box. And Q explains that the next person who has a penalty will also be sent to the penalty box, but that will cause Lieutenant Yar to be erased from existence, basically. So they now have to cooperate with the game or else. And back on the ship, Q appears where Picard still is and says to Picard that if the players on the planet win the game, he'll leave humanity alone from now on. But if they lose, Q can basically do whatever he wants, like he is now. So back on the planet, the crew starts to get pinned down by the pig soldiers. But Q tells Riker that he has now given him the power of the Q as well, so he can stop all this with his powers. So Riker snaps the pigs away and transports the crew back to the Enterprise. And now it's just Q and Riker alone on the planet to have a little powwow. I'm sorry, I can't say powwow anymore. We have a little meeting. And Q explains that the Q continuum are fascinated by humanity because one day they may even surpass the Q continuum in terms of evolution. But Riker still wants to reject. What'd you say?
Because of their hunger.
Because of their hunger for knowledge. Basically, Riker basically says that he doesn't want this gift anymore because there has to be a catch. And so he doesn't want the gift anyway. So Q transports the crew back down to the planet and they start getting slaughtered by the pigmen. Both Worf and Wesley Crusher is brought down for some reason and immediately just pillared with a spike. So Riker quickly caves and uses his Q powers to heal their wounds and send them back to the ship. And now they're all back in the ship. Riker promises Picard that he won't use his powers again, as it would be too tempting to not corrupt him entirely. So they arrive at the colony and they save what they can from the Federation colony, but a child dies, and Riker doesn't use his powers because he promised not to, but he's not happy about it. And as Riker realizes his newfound power over time, he starts to get a little cocky and grumpy toward the crew because he's upset he can't use his powers. So he has them all gather on the bridge to talk about it, and Wesley Crusher and Dr. Crusher show up for some reason. And Q then arrives to try to convince him to embrace his powers. And Riker suggests to the crew that he's fine and he can be trusted with his powers to use them for good. So he suggests that he can show them by giving each crew member one of their desires. And so Picard allows it tentatively. So he gives Wesley the gift of 10 years of age so he can be an adult, which apparently is something he wanted. He gives Geordi back his vision. He wants to give Data the gift of humanity, but Data's like, no, I want to earn it. I don't want it. That's okay. And he gives Worf like a Klingon sex slave of sorts.
That was the weirdest
It was weird. And they all reject the gifts because they all say it's not natural. They want to get the real way. It would just be kind of an illusion. It's not what they want. And this whole thing makes Riker kind of snap out of it and realize that this isn't right, which means that he wins the game. But now Q is all upset that he won and he won't accept their victory, which appears to upset the Q continuum because he starts being pulled somewhere. Basically, he's forcefully beamed back to the continuum, hopefully for his punishment for doing this crazy thing in the first place. And then they get to move on their way and they survive the game. And that's Hyde and Q. So, Steve, what'd you think of it?
Okay, so some things I liked. Q is, I love the Q character.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
Can't get enough of him. I didn't think the planet side was that bad. I knew what it was, but they decorated it well. They gave it the backdrop, and it just needed to be there to play the action. So it did its job, and I respected that. I did like that we got a lot of back and forth from the ship too. Mm-hmm. We don't get that, but someone's down, major scene. Now it's nah, Gary, you're in the penalty box. Now everyone's down. All right, everyone back on the planet. All right, now
back and forth.
And Wesley, you're alive again. Okay, so there ends the things I really liked about this episode. So some things I struggled with, and I got a lot to say about this episode. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Wesley felt really arbitrarily thrown in at the end.
Yes.
When he hadn't been there basically the entire episode. It felt so arbitrary for him to be there, for them to throw him in.
There was no reason for him to be there. Yeah.
That was so dumb, and it made no sense, and everything got weird. Okay. So the other thing is that the plot of this episode was really punchy. Instead of building to a big moment, it was like, like a roller coaster, up and down, up and down. But it never built up to like a high point. And I was trying to figure out why I felt this way. And I think it's because Riker didn't build up his use of the powers.
Right.
He resisted for like a scene, by the way. Resisted for a scene. And then they threw an incredible situation at him where a friend and a child are murdered.
Yeah.
Situation any person would use those powers in.
Mm-hmm.
Not just Riker, not just any person would use them in. And suddenly he saved 2 people. And without any journey, he was just a master of the queue.
Right.
Continue. So then Picard has to talk him down. Okay. And then they go down the planet and he saves the girl.
He doesn't save the girl.
Oh, he doesn't save the girl. Sorry. He goes down. He doesn't save the girl. I'm so tired. He goes down, doesn't save the girl. But like, why are we expected that's more impactful than him choosing to save his friends?
Well, I understood that point at least because
later
Picard even says later that, since Q caused those deaths, he's allowed to use the power to stop those deaths. But for the girl, it was different because that wasn't caused by Q. So you can't use those powers.
That's okay. So because Picard says it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Why is this plot happening like this? This huge moment up front and this much more minor moment in the middle.
I agree in the fact that it was the most jarring that he went from making that promise to Picard, and then all of a sudden he has this very uncharacteristic shift of angriness and bitterness, and like he's like, "Why can't I use my powers?" And you don't understand.
Oh, yeah, he pulled out his chest. He's like has a different persona suddenly.
It was really weird.
There was no journey to that.
Exactly.
That was my issue with this friggin' episode.
That stuck out to me, and Jolie even brought out. She's like, he's not acting like his character. What's going on? And I was like, I don't know yet. I don't remember.
Like, he was a little too big for his britches, I guess. I don't know. It didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And they should have done something with it. It didn't.
I feel like it's another example of just it's early on in the show and they don't really have the full fleshed out Riker yet to where he definitely wouldn't do that. Like he wouldn't just suddenly.
Now, mind you, I wanted them to build to that point.
Yeah.
I did like cocky Riker. I didn't feel like the character had earned it.
Yeah.
But I loved the ending. I don't think I would have changed anything about the ending with the gifts, except for maybe Wesley just did not need to be there.
Correct. Yes.
But like that ending was great. The moment with Geordi, the moment with Data, the thing with Worf, like all of those were good, like character development moments that like original series would have drooled at.
It was impactful. Yeah.
Moments. Yeah. And they were impactful, and each one of them declining was just great.
Yeah, that was a good Star Trek moment.
It was a good proof of concept that's why Picard let him go forward with it. Like everything worked really well. I wouldn't have changed anything about the ending. Okay, so now this one's also long. Okay. Okay, hear me out. I want to hear your take on this because I'm sure there's a Star Trek cultural thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Tasha Yar is the absolute worst part of the show. And it is in no way Denise Crosby's fault.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Tasha Yar is supposed to be the audience's connection to like the terrible Earth that Starfleet came out of. Because she talks about like being in the camps as a kid and like death squads. Like she talks about this stuff in one early episode.
These terrible like colony planets she's from.
Colony planets on Earth and oppressive blah, 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 and people dying in famine and stuff. And she's supposed to be like her connection to like that kind of like gruff, wild, like not everything is great Starfleet. And instead, she's like the worst written female character in the history of sci-fi somehow. And this episode, there's a scene. So if you look in the Trek review note, there's a link.
Oh, I don't know.
That is the exact scene that is just it illustrates perfectly why this is absolutely not her fault, and it is absolutely the writing and what was given to her.
What does it say?
So it's when she gets sent up to the penalty box with Picard. So instead of writing a scene, an actual scene, and relying on Denise Crosby to sell these emotions that her character is going through, knowing that she's been marked for death, and if anyone else goes to the penalty box, she's going to be killed. Like giving her a real scene, they literally had her inner monologue herself, acting outward, literally. And so she's like, "I'm in the penalty box," and then she literally says, and she like yells and goes, oh no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong note. She says, "I'm in the penalty box." She literally says, "It sounds strange, but it definitely isn't." And I was like, what was the line she just had to say to Picard? And then she lets out a yell and says, "It is so frustrating to be controlled like this." And I was like, when she made the noise and was frustrated, did she literally just have to say out loud her exact emotion? And then she starts crying, and then she says out loud, "What the hell am I doing? Crying?" And I was like, what?
It reminds me of that famous Hercules meme, the show Hercules, where the actor Kevin Sorbo, they had accidentally left in the stage direction that he's supposed to be disappointed. That. So he yells out, "Disappointed."
Yes, that's what they did to her for this entire scene. But then Picard tells her that crying is allowed in the penalty box. And then she immediately pivots and makes a romantic pass at Picard, saying, weird. "Oh, Captain, if you weren't a captain." And then John Delancey pops in. But so they took her from like frustrated, controlled female to I can't believe I'm crying. And then needing a man to give her permission, and then immediately turning it romantic when there was no reason to. And I was like, oh my God, they put her through every stereotypical female archetype back to back with matching lines of dialogue. And like, no wonder she wanted out of this shit.
I'm thinking that as you're saying all this, I'm like thinking the same thing. Like, no wonder she wanted to leave the show.
At some point, take a moment and watch that scene, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of writing her and Picard a real scene, they literally just had her say her emotions out loud.
And which is funny, like, because you think about it, her and Troy were up for the opposite roles.
Yeah.
So the fact, and Troy, even though she's, dressed in the tight outfits and stuff at this point, she is always given authority because she's the person they turn to for what are the feelings of this going on, even though it's silly sometimes. But she's the counselor and they give her some kind of authority, whereas they've been giving Yar just terrible stuff to go off of here. You're absolutely right. And it's just, she could have been an empowered woman who had come through a lot, but instead they make her
a window into like the darkness that still remains.
And like the whole Code of Honor episode, she was like all up the ass of the terrible misogynist leader guy. She thought he was attractive and everything. It was like, what is happening? Right. So, I completely see your point there. It was not good.
So once again, I just want to state this. Tasha Yar is the absolute worst part of the show, and it is 100% not Denise Crosby's fault.
That's right.
You were right to leave. You were right to get out of this, Denise. This, seeing what you had to read, it must have been awful. It must have been awful.
Yeah.
Knowing that you were doing this.
It's a weird character they made. They did not follow through well with it.
And then Geordi has his eyes back for 2 seconds, looks at a planet, and immediately turns and makes a pass at you.
Yeah, and that was odd too.
Through that, how do you act through that fucking choice? I'm so sorry, Denise Crosby. It's not your fault.
And part of it also might be, which I'll mention later in the trivia as well, that Marina Sirtis, who plays Troy, was supposed to be in this episode. It's kind of unclear, but she's off of a couple episodes in a row, and so she had thought that she was actually going to be let go of the show for a little bit there because she didn't know why she wasn't in a couple episodes.
Ooh,
and
okay.
apparently the original script for this, some of Yar's lines were written for Troy. And so some of them would almost make a little bit more sense of her kind of explaining emotions if it was Troy.
That might actually.
So it almost makes some sense at this really badly written scene for just a person to say, why am I crying? Like, what? So, yeah, it's still not good, though. They should have written better since it was going to be young.
So bad and not her fault.
No, not at all. So where do you place this within the other ones you've seen this season? Ish.
So this episode, once again, there's some merits where I do like it. We do get a little bit more out of Q because even Q, in that moment, that was so manufactured where she was crying that makes the pass at Kirk.
That's Picard.
Picard. And then her crying clearly makes Q uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like even that was like a nice moment to
Right.
see like Q is not devoid of sympathy in certain situations, or at least can be made uncomfortable.
That's true. With human emotions.
So there were some interesting things tucked in there. I liked the initial presentation where it was like a floating orb with 3 cobras sticking out of it.
Yeah, this is
I was like, what the hell is that?
I am Q. 3 cobras.
Perhaps something more approachable, Picard. And I was like, oh, okay, there he is. All right.
There he is.
So yeah, I guess probably right in the middle, because this episode is what solidified. Now, my issues with Tasha Yar extend beyond this episode, but this episode just perfectly spelled out.
Yeah, because in Code of Honor, she was bad, but it's like the whole episode was terrible. So it was like,
it's hard to pick out the pieces.
Yeah, but now the pieces are standing out pretty high. It was
right.
Easy to pick
this
them
was
out.
like the chance, and I was like, this is her chance. She has her moments, and I was like, what is this fucking writing? What is this?
Well, she's gone soon, so don't worry about it.
I know. Episode, like we're at the end of the season, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
All right, you got some factoids?
Yeah,
I know we just got a few mixed in there.
So some of the elements of Maurice Hurley's original story for this episode, that's the writer who wrote a lot of episodes of Star Trek, expanded on the backstory of Q's species, explaining that there were only 3 Qs, but another 100,000 residents on the Q planet who required relocation as the planet was dying. But these elements didn't subsequently make it into a future episode. So they kind of changed the way the Q continuum works. It doesn't work like that. So it's an interesting little fact. This marks the first appearance of a female new style Klingon since the original series.
True.
Since the introduction of the now common ridged forehead designs in the feature films, only male Klingons had been seen. And the intention here seems to be that the forehead ridges of the female Klingons run well past their hairline, something that was abandoned in subsequent appearances of Klingon women, as well as the fishnet stockings. That was no longer a thing that happened in future installments. And they also aren't subservient like that. It's always like fight. That's like all of sex is them fighting back and forth. The women are fierce and they can kick a male Klingon's ass.
Strange.
And a novel called Q and A establishes that Q was sent by the Continuum to give Picard the power of the Q as a test of humanity's ability to save the universe eventually. But Q disregarded their directive and he gave it to Riker instead. So that's like how they flesh out this episode from the behind the scenes thing. But Steve, what are you Trek Connection, Muppet Connections this week?
Okay. So I'm going to tell you this.
Okay.
I will never get an easier Trek Connection, Muppet Connection than I got for this episode.
Oh, wow.
Never in my life again will I ever have one this easy. So I only did one. I didn't even bother searching after this. Okay, so I opened up this episode, Next Generation, on IMDb.
Mm-hmm.
I picked one of the extras, one of the victims down on the planet. Name was Elaine Naley. She's a very minor actress. She only has 4 credits to her name. One of those credits, Muppets from Space. She's credited as Mashed Potato Lady in 1999's Muppets from Space.
Oh my God.
4 credits to her name, and one of them was this episode, and the other was a Muppet thing.
She was a lady with one line that said, like, we're the last people here, that lady?
I think, yeah. So I just, and like literally, I popped up her page, and there was a picture of Muppets in Space on it.
That's crazy.
Like, I didn't have to do anything but write it down. So I'm just going to walk away into the sunset on that one. Like, I'm never going to get it that good again. So I got to enjoy it.
There's only so many Muppet episodes left. And then the easy connection until Tasha Yar is gone is that her father's Bing Crosby. And I'm sure you can connect some Bing Crosby stuff to
It's true. I'm going to have to go. Once we get to Fraggle Rock, I am going to have to pivot and do predominantly off of the Star Trek episode. So I'm really going to have to rely on special guests of the week and stuff to make it happen.
That's true. We'll have to figure out some other bits to do for the Fraggle Rock. We've already been talking about it, folks.
I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, though. I think I'm just going to be able to do it because Star Trek has such a cavalcade of one-shot actors and minor actors that do 1 and 2 episode arcs and all these different things very diversely.
But does Fraggle Rock have guests?
No.
Doesn't say.
But I can still connect Trek to Muppets.
To Jim Henson Productions.
Jim Henson.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what all of this is about.
That's true. Yeah.
So Trek Connection, Muppet Connection still going on.
I like it. All right.
It will live beyond the Muppet Show.
Good, because the two franchises are so similar, just like these two episodes are so similar.
They're basically merging into one thing. Both of these feature people entreating others to refute temptation. Mac Davis imploring Piggy to not get hooked on him, and Picard asking Riker to refuse the Q powers.
That was the same one of the same ones.
I told you. At least 2 of them would be the same.
Both have a barrier being placed in front of characters, stopping them from moving forward. Q placing the barrier in front of the Enterprise to stop it from moving forward, and the curtains constantly falling in front of the Muppets as they're dressed as barbershop guys in another opening, another show number.
That's a great one. Both feature second fiddles with power going to their heads. The assistant Beakers using their newly found numbers to hunt down Dr. Bunsen Honeydew like a dog, and Riker getting too big for his britches with the Q power.
That's very nice. Both contain a character that is stopped from doing their job by an outside surprise force, the whole Enterprise crew on their way to save a colony by Q, and Gonzo from playing his trumpet by a rogue turkey in the beginning of the episode.
I have almost the same one, but just slightly different. Both feature someone messing around when someone else is trying to do something serious. Q interrupting during the crisis mission, and Beauregard cleaning during Rolf's very serious performance.
Very nice. Well, you stole my last one. Did you have another one?
No, that's it.
Oh, that's right. We have that. You got the 3.
I just told you at least 2 of them would be the same. And I was close.
Oh, gosh. Wait, what's that?
Transporter malfunction. Transporter malfunction.
All right. It's a part of the episode where we transport one character from one episode and vice versa. So what you got for us, Steve?
I'm going to bring over those Beastmen from Trek and bring them to the Muppet Show and replace the Beakers in their outfits with their guns hunting down Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and then stabbing him repeatedly, only for him to be brought back.
Oh, God. Star Trek to Muppets, I'd have Q trade places with Beaker. So then Beaker would finally have the power to get sweet revenge on Dr. Bunsen Honeydew.
We also, there'd be like a dozen copies of Q. Is that what I'm hearing?
Pretty much, yeah.
Eventually, Q's replaced the band.
He's replaced everything, whole world.
So Muppets to Trek this week, I'm going to bring over the Beakers to replace the Beastmen. Same exact turn of the coin. I think it would be way more frightening to see 24 of those bastards coming at you like a tornado of red hair and fists.
Just big open mouths trying to eat them.
Oh, God, Captain Down! Use your powers, please!
Being impaled by Beakers. Muppets of Star Trek, I'd have Mac Davis replace Riker. So Q would have no power of temptation over Mac Davis because he's as cool as a cucumber.
Davis would just refuse it the first time and be done.
Yeah, he's perfect in every way. So how could he have any use for his powers? There you go.
Oh, Lord, it's
hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. And that brings us to the end of episode 112 of the MuppeTrek Podcast.
Join us next time for the Muppet Show with special guest Carol Burnett.
And the Next Generation episode, Haven.
So for the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone. I might want to push the button.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.